Mr. President.
Majority Leader.
Are we in a quorum? And I hope you had a good birthday yesterday, Mr. President.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, so decades ago, President Reagan warned that debt ceiling brinksmanship, quote, threatens the holders of government bonds and those who rely on Social Security and veterans benefits. And the United States, he said, has a special responsibility to itself and to the world to meet its obligations. If President Reagan were around today, he might well be exiled by a modern Republican Party that in many ways seems dead set on abandoning that special responsibility never to default. We have less than a month to go until we hit June 1st. Every day wasted is another day closer to catastrophe. At stake is the well-being of families, retirees, veterans, kids, the very stability of our economy. But by ramming the Default on America Act through the House, totally partisan, knowing full well this bill can never become law, Speaker McCarthy and the hard right have made the odds of default go up. By handing his gavel over to the hard right, the Speaker is giving the American people two terrible options: either default on the debt or default on the country, with steep cuts to law enforcement, first responders, veterans, seniors, and even cancer research. Just think how radical such an ultimatum truly is. It's a dramatic break from how both parties have approached default in the past. On one hand, a Republican default would crash the economy, increase costs, kill American jobs. Unemployment would rise to at least 8%. Mortgage and car payments would all go up by a lot, while the value of pensions and 401ks would come crashing down. That is the future that Speaker McCarthy and the House Freedom Caucus have made more likely by passing Default on America Act. But the alternative is also a nightmare scenario. If the Republicans' Default on America Act became law, 1 million seniors would lose access to Meals on Wheels. These are seniors who literally can't get food on their own much of the time and rely on others bringing it to them. They would be on the chopping block if the GOP has its way. Deprive seniors who can't leave their homes of food? What is that all about? So that some very wealthy multi-billionaires don't have to pay any taxes? It's outrageous. Here's another one. The Republican Default on America Act would eliminate 30,000 law enforcement jobs across the country. You know what that means? Gun violence will get even worse. Our neighborhoods will become less safe. Border security would be deprived of billions in crucial resources. The war on opioids would decline, and more addictions, crimes, and others from opioid use would go up. What is that all about? Once again, the hard right, totally enthralled by the very wealthy few who are so greedy they don't want to pay any taxes, say cut things like this, cut law enforcement, cut Meals on Wheels. The Default on America Act would shamefully attack our nation's veterans, purging 80,000 VA jobs, leaving our nation's heroes without the care they've earned throughout a lifetime of service. These are just three of many, but eliminate Meals on Wheels, greatly hurt our efforts at law enforcement and safety by dramatically cutting, defunding police, greatly tying the hands of the VA so that veterans would get worse health care and they'd have to wait even longer. This is what the Republican Default on America bill does. That's why it's dead on arrival, not for some political or ideological reason, but it would do such harm. And when you wonder about the motivation of the Republicans, it's ultimately is this, these right-wing Republicans. Listen to the greedy few, the powerful, greedy few, who don't want to pay any taxes or want to have taxes reduced. Some of them even called for eliminating the income tax. And finally, the Default on America Act is chock full of totally irrelevant, hard-right goodies that would deregulate fossil fuels, reward corporate greed, shower the ultra-rich with tax giveaways, and impose cruel and unpopular work requirements on vulnerable families. So whether it's kicking seniors to the curb, cutting law enforcement jobs, or abandoning our veterans, everything about the Default on America Act reeks of MAGA extremism. So it's no wonder the Republicans did it in secret. It's no wonder that they didn't want to do what they promised to do, have hearings, have witnesses, have bipartisan discussion and amendments. But if Republicans won't level with the American people about their terrible bill, Senate Democrats are going to do it for them. Tomorrow, the Senate Budget Committee holds a hearing on how Default on America Act would weaken the economy and slash hundreds of thousands of jobs. I want to thank Chairman Whitehouse and all the members of the committee for doing the important work of bringing this bill to the public eye, because the American people deserve better. Incredibly, Mr. President, incredibly, tomorrow's hearing will be the very first hearing in either House that actually looks at what the Default on America Act does. Amazing. This huge bill that affects almost every aspect of American life, they haven't had one hearing on the issues they are doing. But we're going to start doing it. And that hearing will be the first, but there will be many others. And as Democrats shine a light on how unserious and extreme the Republican Default on America Act is, our view about the path forward remains the same. Can't choose the Default on America Act, must avoid the horrors of default, pass a clean bipartisan bill to avert default. Now, later today, I will join my colleagues and committee chairs at a press conference to talk about the next steps in the Senate's effort to outcompete the Chinese government and preserve America's global leadership in the 21st century. The Democratic-led Senate has done some important bipartisan work to outcompete the Chinese Communist Party in the last few years. The infrastructure, chips and science, and the omnibus bill all did some in that regard. But we all know we can't stop there. We have to build on this progress. This work is critical to our national security. It won't be enough to outcompete the Xi regime in any single area. We must be ready to compete with all of them on all these fronts, and that will require comprehensive and bipartisan legislation. We must not aid and abet the Chinese government's development of advanced technologies like microchips, 5G, AI, quantum computing, and more that will shape the course of this century. We must limit investment capital from flowing to the Xi regime, the Chinese government, and prevent them from taking advantage of America's critical assets. We must continue in investing in our workforce and other key technology areas that drive American innovation. And we must strengthen our economic and military alliances and partnerships around the world to constrain Chinese potential aggression. The Chinese government is not constraining itself in its pursuit to dominate the 21st century. And if we in America were to rest on our laurels, if we let the CCP beat us, it would have serious consequences for the world's democratic nations. The United States cannot afford to cede its leadership to governments opposed to democracy and individual liberty. We cannot let authoritarianism call the shots in the 21st century. So that's why this bipartisan effort in the Senate will be so important. The Senate has already shown that both sides are capable of working together on this most important issue, and I thank my colleagues who will join me at our press conference later this afternoon. Finally, on Senate business, it's going to be another busy day here on the Senate floor. Later this morning, the Senate will vote on the confirmation of Aurelia Merchant, whom I was proud to recommend to President Biden to serve as district judge for the Eastern District of New York. We'll also advance the nomination of two more terrific nominees, Wesley Shue to serve as the district judge for California, and LaShonda Hunt to serve as district judge for Illinois. By the end of this week, the Senate will have moved forward with one circuit court judge, Anthony Johnstone, and as many as 5 new district court judges. And the Senate will continue doing the important work of ensuring the federal bench is filled with excellent, mainstream, and highly qualified judges in the weeks and months to come. I yield the floor and note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk will call a roll.